Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cash App, a weekly conversation with DFIR folks. And today we have the amazing Mike Williamson. Mike is a technical forensics consultant who I have the privilege of working with at Magnet Forensics. But prior to coming to us, he was a digital forensics examiner at the Calgary Police Service. He also is the author of some amazing blogs. His blogs are at forensicmike1.com. Some of the things I've loved that he's put out is his work on Knowledge C, where he built on a lot of the Apollo work and research from Sarah Edwards, looking at things like now playing entries. Some of his work with the photo vault apps is incredible. He has a GitHub, and his GitHub, in addition to some scripts, has some interesting things. Like there's a list of all the COVID-19 apps and their permissions that might be of interest to you. Really a good focus on the fact that examiners should learn about Git, and he did a great blog post on that, learning Git to make you a better examiner. And really, Mike has had this strong focus the last couple of months on motivating forensicators to getting into reverse engineering apps and the fact that they can do it. And all of this work that he's done, both in his personal blog and since he joined Magnet earlier this year, has gotten him nominated for DFIR Newcomer of the Year for 2019, in the 2020 forecast voting. So if you really appreciate Mike, and hopefully you'll learn some more about him and see why he might be your choice for Newcomer of the Year, you have the opportunity to vote via that link. And with that, this is Mike Williamson. Hi, Mike.
Hello. How are you?
Great. Happy to be chatting with you today.
Yeah.
So you've been doing really, really cool stuff this last year, and you really came out of nowhere this year. Right? Like I learned about all your amazing work at the beginning of the year, and then I was like, heck yeah, if Mike wants to come join us at Magnet, let's do it, right?
Absolutely.
So how did you get here?
Well, the story I would have to say begins with a fella named Alexis Brignoni. I was down in Orlando in the early part of 2019 for 4585 with Heather and part of SANS in Orlando. And I learned at that point that Alexis, who I had been talking with on Twitter for various things, lived in that area. Now, funny enough, he was at Magnet User Summit at the same time as SANS last in 2019. So, but I learned that he lived in Orlando. So we decided that he was going to have enough time when he got back from the User Summit to meet up. And so him, myself, and one of my coworkers from Calgary, Oleg, great examiner, we went for pizza, I think, right near the Hilton area there. And we had planned on like 30, 45 minutes or something. And I swear we must have been there for like 2.5 hours. And we were just having a blast. We were talking shop. And, I could see that Alexis was, such a passionate person about digital forensics and about the community and contributing to the community, et cetera. And, one of the conversations we had was in relation to the work I had done on LGMPT as part of CASE. And for anyone that doesn't know, LGMPT is basically the knowledge C of LG products that sometimes gets kind of forgotten. So I had talked to him a little bit about that, and I mentioned that I had done like a research paper on it, and he was very, very insistent that I get that work out there, right? Because literally, other than a couple of folks, no one had seen it. And that was really, he talked about you a lot, Jessica. He talked about the DFIR review. He talked about a bunch of things. So that kind of led to me starting to work on some custom artifacts for LGMPT. And when I was just about ready to submit them, I talked to Alexis again, and he said,
custom artifacts for the artifact exchange?
Yes. So I was about to do my submission, and Alexis is like, okay, well, just, the advice I have for you is if you're going to submit them, the best thing you can do is to back it up with a blog post.
Yes.
Right. And so I'm like, okay, well, the one problem is I don't have a blog. And he's like, it's 2019, like make one. And so this really was like the transition point for me of being a police officer and never talking about casework and
Yep.
kind of that default mindset that we all have, to where I realized, you know what, we can talk about some things. Obviously, you can't talk about everything, and you need to be careful about what you release, and you need to redact things. But at the end of the day, there's always things you can share. And so Alexis was literally the biggest catalyst for me to create my blog. And I think the LGMPT blog post, which was my very first one, yeah, it got me lots of followers on Twitter. It got lots of great conversations going, both publicly, also in direct messages, and it really opened my eyes to how powerful. I think for a lot of people, having a blog is like this thing where you kind of maybe have played with it in the past and like done one post and forgotten about it, and then so you just assume that'll happen again, and it's like it's not really worth the effort. But the reality is, in this very specialized environment, I mean, if you have something to say, people are going to read it.
Yes. Well,
Right.
and not only that, right? So there's this big concept of just-in-time forensics. So if
Yeah.
I don't have an LG phone where I
Yes.
need to be looking at that, I don't need it. And
Right.
so it's one thing to tweet about it because there's a lot about how you share, right? But if I
Yes.
just tweet about what I did, hey, I found this and the data source is this and this is where you get it and you can do it on an MPT connection, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. You don't, which is, by the way, so freaking cool because it means that the
Hmm.
phone doesn't need to be unlocked.
Exactly.
like I don't
Yeah.
know if people realize that, but MPT means that the phone can be in a lock state and you can still extract this data.
And it can be wiped as
And it
well
can
and
be
still
wiped.
be there.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
which is
So
unbelievable.
amazing source, and it's it's the type of artifacts that give us pattern of life. So just amazing work, Mike. But people who weren't, and so many people had done a lot of this work. Alexis and I did some work on Android stuff pertaining to pattern of life stuff. Sarah had done all the stuff on Apollo. And then that discovery that LG had their own way of storing pattern of life artifacts, really,
Yes.
really great.
Yeah.
But exactly what it was. If you don't share it, it's not out there. So that blog post was phenomenal. But the just in time forensics comes in on
Hmm.
when I'm working a case. I
Hmm.
need to be able to Google and follow that information, find that information,
Exactly.
so we're not restarting the wheel. And the whole thing is
Yes.
you build on things.
You
And
do.
I love the fact that you brought up. I find so much of it is having that conversation with somebody and somebody else says, yes, what
Hmm.
you did is of value.
Yeah.
Please, please, please share it with the
Yeah.
community. I
Yeah.
might not need it today, but I sure as heck am going to need it later. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing those posts and starting to put out that data. And it
Yeah.
was really, really great work. And also, the more of us that contribute,
Yeah.
the more we see how easy it is to do. So
Well,
great, great work.
thank you. And one of the things I really like about this particular specialty, as opposed to say other areas in InfoSec, is that if somebody puts something out there and it's not 100% of the way done, or maybe there's even an inaccurate point, rather than like jumping on it like vultures, my experience has been that people are constructive. They're not quick to shoot down someone's observations. They try to work with them on it, and essentially the goal is always to get that information out there rather than
Yes.
assess whether somebody is skilled or still learning.
And we can all build on everything we see. The other
Right.
thing is there are so many, especially most of your work has been in mobile that you've put out publicly.
Yes. Yeah.
And there are so many different variations of
Yes.
combinations of app versions, OS versions,
Huh.
hardware
Ain't that
that
the truth?
that it's not that what you did is necessarily inaccurate.
Hmm.
It's that there are other circumstances and
Exactly.
situations where the
Yep.
data is stored differently or evolved or changed, or now it's in a protobuf and
Hmm.
or now what used to be an AP list is now a P list that's inside a SQLite database where it's referenced
Yep.
as the blob. And
Yep.
these changes happen and this evolution happens. So we need to continuously build. I'd say one of the things that I get a lot is I'll have an old post that's out there
Yep.
and somebody will reach out to me and they'll go, this doesn't work anymore. And I'm like,
Mhm.
great, let's figure out how it is now.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Because that worked 3 years ago. I don't expect it to be the same
Right.
now.
Yep.
And so let's get on it together. And then why don't you put out what you learn and share that with the community?
Even if
And
it just
that's
gives
what it's about.
somebody else like somewhere to pick up from rather than
Yes.
scratch. I think
Yes.
that in itself can just be such an uplifting thing when you're dealing with an app that's, you Google it. Like when I first Googled MPT, There was nothing. I found one thread on XDA developers where people were discussing that they found this service running on their LG phone and that it was a resource hog, but nobody was looking into like what it did or what artifacts it stored. Nobody had looked at it from sort of a forensic standpoint, and so that was really shocking to me because I'm like, this is a treasure trove of information that persists through a wipe. Like, why has this not been looked at? And I really think it's a good example of there are so many of these treasure troves out there. You know, I think people have some assumptions sometimes, maybe not so much digital forensics people because they experience it so much, but maybe on the outside, right? Where there's this assumption that all of the things have been found, right?
No, no, and that's the thing, right? Like even on, what blows my mind is we can look at just like there is an amazing work that's coming out on NTFS, and the fact that where there's still work coming out on NTFS, on Windows file systems that have been around forever, we should know that means we don't know crap in mobile, right? Like there is so much.
And even if we ever did achieve a certain level of understanding, the next day, when the hundreds of apps, that we understood well get patched, even slightly, we have a whole new ball game because like look at I did the Signal post on the Magnet blog not too long ago, and I literally just went through the commit list and I just randomly picked one, and it actually turned out to be quite interesting. I thought, I mean, I guess I'm a bit of a geek that way, but they changed the way that I think it was draft messages are represented in the GUI, and so it sort of changed the behavior of how it might look on the screen, and so I thought, well, this seems minor, but as we all know from a forensics perspective, sometimes those little tiny things they can break a case wide open, right? So I thought it was really cool that I could pick like a random commit and have something that potentially could have some forensic significance, spawning from it, and that was just a minor commit. Like there are huge commits on there that would take many, many weeks to dissect and establish what had been changed, but yeah. That was just a little one.
And that goes to a really, really good point, right? Because one of the things you've been stressing, and some people may be listening and going, I've never looked at a commit. I've never turned around and looked at the app's source code on applications where the source code is available, because that seems scary and foreign. I'm not a developer. I don't have a comp sci degree, et cetera. Those kinds of feelings.
And one more I would throw in there would be, I don't want to have to testify to that.
I don't want to have to testify to that. Absolutely.
I've heard that one lots.
So here's the deal, right? If you are feeling that way, Mike has done, along with Chris Atha, an amazing, it was part of the Magnet Virtual Summit, so it was a session there, but it was really a lab. There's hands-on materials you can download to get to it. So if you're interested in that, that's on the Magnet Forensics Resources site, and I highly encourage everyone to do it and walk through it. I was blown away by some of the analogies Mike used that really make, and he's laughing because he knows exactly what I'm talking about.
What I want to do is give a shout out to somebody for this, because I did a walkthrough of the session with our own Tara Melton. And Tara was amazing with her comments as always. And one of the things she said was, I think you went too quickly through this technical stuff, and I think a few analogies could really shore up the session. So like without that feedback from her, it probably wouldn't have been as smooth in the delivery. So kind of comes to
I feel like there's a big theme to everything you're saying, Mike, and it's really around collaboration, right? If we don't, and I'm kind of getting goosebumps thinking about it, right? Because if you hadn't reached out to Alexis and him encouraged you to write the blog, that content wouldn't be out there. And if you hadn't collaborated with Tara about going through what you were going to present, there is no reason to feel like you're in a bubble. If you collaborate with others and ask other people to check, they may come up with other solutions. A great way to do this, like you mentioned, is through DFIR review, because then you've got a whole bunch of other practitioners looking at your blog post or your work and providing comments, feedback, not that you have to take action on, for the community to take action on, because none of us do this in isolation, right? I have never done any research. You have never done any research. None of us have ever done any research where we weren't building on a skill, a technique, or a method, or even straight up databases and how they were parsed that we learned from somebody else in this community. And That's amazing, right? So
Yeah.
we just keep, and so like the more people build on your work, but back to your reverse
Hmm.
engineering stuff.
Hmm.
Um, Anybody who looks at that and watches that, you'll learn that you can do this. Does it
Exactly.
take practice? Yes. But can you do it? Abso-freaking-lutely. And better yet,
Absolutely.
should you be doing it? Yeah,
Yeah.
if you got smoking gun evidence,
Yeah.
you want to make sure that it's right.
Hmm.
And guess what? If you start doing this, you actually gain the ability to testify, in my opinion, better. I don't
And
know.
it's a two-way street, because let's say you do try something for the first time and you're not 100% sure of what you found. I mean, that's where the community comes in again, right?
Yes.
Because Chris and I both put our contact information in that presentation. I'll reiterate it again today. Reach out to people in the community. It doesn't have to be me. Like, for example, in the Frida world, and just for anyone who didn't get to attend the session, Frida is like a live dynamic analysis tool, or dynamic binary instrumentation, I think is the technical term. Basically, it attaches to a running process, whether it be on a computer, a cell phone. It's platform independent and allows you to manipulate things, observe methods being called, stuff like that. And so it's amazing, but it's got a huge learning curve. And one of the best things about Frida is the Telegram group that's there, because it's filled with a lot of people, but a lot of those people are really, really good at these things. And so you can throw a question out there and generally have an answer pretty quick. And then everyone else who is in the channel is going to see those answers. So then it has a ripple effect, hopefully,
And
right?
Frida builds so much on regular traditional forensics techniques, right? So
It
let's
does.
say you look at permissions, right? I
Yeah.
always look at permissions first to find
Mhm.
apps of interest. So
Yep.
let's say you look at permissions. Now
Yep.
you see that this thing has permissions to SMS. Why the heck does it do it? Run the
Mhm.
app in Frida and
Yep.
watch the calls. This
Yep.
is how you're going to find out how the app is utilizing those weird permissions, because a lot of like that stuff is, oh,
Mhm.
I think it's awesome.
Well, you can
So
track everything from, like, is this physical button pushed down right now? You
yes.
can tell in Frida. You can run a command and find out the state of the buttons. You can track when people do Touch ID. You can bypass Touch ID, for heaven's sake. Like, you can do all this crazy stuff. And it's funny because there are, with every subsequent iteration of iOS, there are additional things that go in to make it more difficult. And, you know, Ole Andre, who's the creator of Frida, just comes up with these ingenious solutions to make it work again. My favorite one is with pointer authentication, right, where there's an address that's stored to for verification purposes, and one of the things that they do, I remember I was reading about this. There are pages of memory that they made it such that you can't have a page of memory executable and writable at the same time.
Oh,
And so the workaround was they would freeze the page of memory, take away the executable flag, put a writable flag, do the writes, remove the writable flag, put the executable flag, and then continue on, all in the span of like 2
oh,
milliseconds. And it
that's
completely subverts the entire protection. Like,
that's that's wicked smart. That's a
it
wicked smart
is,
way to
it
get
is.
around it. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yes. So if you
Um,
ever need to feel like humble, just talk to Ole Andre for a minute,
Holy
because
crap.
he's quite the genius that way.
Should also mention that you have a Frida CLI tools repository on your GitHub as well.
Yeah, so I think that was a fork from when I was
Yep.
doing a pull request on the Frida tools. And that was a good story because I had asked something on the Telegram, like I kind of indicated, and Ole Andre came on there and said, yeah, it doesn't do that right now, but it could. You could do a pull request. I'm like, oh yeah, I could do a pull request. So, I did it. It was a little bit tricky at first just to get everything set up, and it's Python, which isn't my first language. um, but uh, but uh,
You're not
but
a native
I
Python speaker.
no, I don't know if you but we can get there with some googling, and but the cool
Or
thing
checking out
was,
Alexis's course.
yes, that too, which is awesome. I've heard some really great reviews from the folks that are attending that, so kudos to him on that. And did you see his most recent video for
Um,
the nominations thing?
okay. So anyone who hasn't checked out Alexis's video for nominating A Leap and I Leap, And by the way, Alexis is going to be our guest here on Cash Up on July 21st, which is the Tuesday right after the Forecast Awards. Uh,
After he does a
so
clean sweep, let's be
after he does a
honest.
clean sweep. So Alexis is nominated in 5 categories, and he did a video about why you should vote for iLeap. And iLeap in itself was nominated both for forensic. I forget what the term is, but non-commercial. I think that's what they call it, non-commercial tool of the year, as well as a blog post he had written about it. And then Alexis is nominated in several categories himself, including Investigator of the Year. The link to vote for people is up there. Mike
I
just
just
dropped
pasted the
me
link
the link.
on
Yeah,
Skype there.
I'm
So
dropping it into the I'll drop it as magnet. I'm dropping the link for Alexis's video. Fun and so fun.
I told him
So
the only thing
after
is now people are
Cash
going to
Up, check it
expect
out.
that level of production from every video. Right? So you're going to be
It
spending all
is
your time editing.
it is fantastic, and it really does say why you should absolutely vote for iLeap
Mm-hmm.
for the awards. So I hope you really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to know, we mentioned your role, and you're a technical forensic consultant here at Magnet, and
Technically, yes.
technically a technical
Yes,
forensic
technically.
consultant. What does that mean you do?
Well, so we have a lot of forensic consultants at Magnet, and so the distinction with the technical term is so myself and Jamie McQuaid, who everybody who's heard stuff from Magnet ever is aware of, so Jamie and I work on the engineering team. Whereas our other examiners work in training or for marketing or all throughout the organization.
Or wherever, yeah.
Exactly. For Jamie and I, our role is specifically to provide our digital forensics background and expertise to the folks in engineering, because we want to avoid having a situation where dev doesn't have a really easily activatable like examiner resource, because
Mhm.
examiner type questions come up all the time.
All the time.
And like I will say,
Yeah.
it is a lot more difficult than I thought it would be, because there are these sort of ambiguous questions that come up of like, how is the best way to present this? And there really isn't a right answer, because you can say, well, we should make it easier for the user, right? That's on the one end of the spectrum. But then that means kind of making things a little bit different than they actually reside in the database. Or on the other end of the spectrum, you can say, well, no, we never change anything because we want our examiners to be able to see it as it exists on
Well,
the device.
there's a lot of nuance there, and
Yes.
one of the keys to me is that everything that you see,
Yeah,
that the definitions in the artifact reference guide should be solid so people
exactly.
know,
Yeah.
and then so that they know what that column header means, but
Yes.
also everything is source linked to its original
Yeah.
location in the data, so anyone can validate and look at it as its original source, and that kind of
100%.
then provides that balance
Yes.
of being able to see something in a friendly terminology,
Yeah.
and then being able to see the raw data, and then being able to have that translation between both, which is what I think the artifact reference guide does. So
Yeah.
I know that what you do is really intriguing and interesting work, because before when we had way less forensics
Hmm.
folks,
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of that
Yeah.
role.
Yeah.
So I truly appreciate it. I'm so happy that we have people dedicated to that instead of doing
Mhm.
other things at the same time, because
Well,
it's super necessary.
it is absolutely. And I mean, the cool thing is that, and I don't know if we really planned this per se, but Jamie's background is corporate. And he's got a really strong computer forensics piece. And that's not to say he doesn't do mobile. He does tons of mobile. But for me, my strengths are mobile, right?
And law
Specifically
enforcement
iOS.
background.
Yeah. And law enforcement back. And then Jamie's more Android. So it actually blends perfectly, right? Because we have a little bit of experience from all the different areas. So between the two of us, we can tackle almost any question that comes in. And that's not to say we're not relying on other examiners throughout the organization. Um,
That is
as you know,
absolutely not true.
as you know,
We are talking about things all the time.
yeah, Yep, and there are some great discussions that go on, and I feel like for me, I came into the company thinking, okay, I've got my bearings, in as a digital forensic examiner, so this transition will be very easy, and I'm just going to keep on doing digital forensics, and well, yes, in some ways, but because I have those developer skills as well, that was a big awakening for me. Like the amount of exposure I had to get before I came into the org was very limited. Like I had a GitHub, but I didn't really understand Git. So just that alone, there was a bit of a reckoning in the early days because everybody else that's contributing on the code base has a degree with this stuff and has been doing this stuff for many, many years. So, one of the things that I have really liked the most about the org, and you got to remember the law of contrast here, because where I came from in government, we had our IT department, and they were very, very rigid about who did any coding whatsoever. And that's not to say I didn't code. I absolutely did, but it wasn't ever a case of like, let's work together, on these initiatives and things. It was kind of two distinct
Well,
areas, right?
there's a very big difference between a large scale product and writing a single parser or script.
Exactly.
Right. There's a dramatic difference. That's a new world to enter. And also there's a difference between a script you write and a very large shared code base. Yes. Where what you do may affect things you have no idea even exist.
Well, and so you know what? I have been writing code since I was a kid, and I have been writing C# since I was like, I don't know, in my teens, and I have been writing WPF apps since I was like, not that, probably still teens, late teens, something like that.
I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. Don't think that you have to have been coding since you were a kid or a teenager in order to write scripts or contribute to forensics. You do not need, just start with Alexis's Python class. Just start somewhere. I just want to make that clear.
It's a great point. What I will add though is that one of the things that I most definitely missed in my sort of lifelong developer career that wasn't really a career because it was always extra to my roles, is that there is a thing we do at software companies called code review.
Yes.
And it has got to be the most profoundly impactful thing that's happened to me as a developer in my entire life. Having people who are qualified, who are coders, who are experienced with writing forensic stuff, look at your code and make suggestions, give some extra information and insight. The only other, like, in the past, I've only ever had sort of the end user feedback.
Really?
Where it's like the app works for me. Isn't that great? No one's ever said to me like, hey, have you tried, unless the app is like crashing because it's using 5 gigs of memory or something, no one's going to be like, hey, could you code this differently? Because if it works, right?
So wait, so that's, as far as development, I know you're saying that that's new to you, but in the labs you worked in, and I'm taking my own experience in here, did you use peer review processes that were the same on reviews of your reports and then suggestions of other things to look at? So it's very similar to the forensic peer. What you're saying to me is so similar. And when I started working at Magnet and seeing that process, it felt so similar to me to the digital forensics peer review process. You do your analysis, you write your report, another examiner reviews your report before it goes out the door and makes suggestions and said, oh, did you check this database? Have you looked at this? I saw this once before, or helps you with your language and your English and make sure that your report is written in a way, in all honesty, that will be more well prepared for court, right? So that your assertions are at the right level, et cetera. So I think that same thing exists in the digital forensics world. It's just applying it to a different place.
It's just a different, So maybe that's why it resounds so much with me.
Right.
It's like appealing to my familiarity a bit. But so I like to throw out sort of unit tests as an example of something that I was aware of.
Can you explain a unit test to everyone else? Because remember, most people listening are primarily doing forensics.
Right. So it may be a term that people have heard throughout, especially if you've done a little bit of programming, you may have seen other, developers talking about it in Stack Overflow threads and things. But they basically give us a way to test a very specific component of code. And so one of the things you'll find is that as an application gets bigger and bigger, it becomes more and more time intensive to fire up the app and get it to that state where you're ready to try the thing that you're manipulating. So from that perspective, unit tests are amazing, even when you're coding just on your own, because you can skip to the important parts. And then when you come back to the application a year later and make a slight change, this is the other big part of the testing, is that you can verify that what you've changed hasn't had any unexpected impacts to other functionality within the app. This is particularly important when you have a collaborative environment where you have multiple developers working on things, because there's nothing worse than making a change that impacts somebody else's work without even realizing it, right? So for that purpose, having these tests is just amazing. And it really makes me wish I could kind of go back in time and, write some tests on the code that I've written in the past. But you know what? We don't, you can't change it, right? So it's really just a matter of moving forward. It's something that, I feel has been very, very beneficial for me to learn about.
Absolutely. I think that's really cool. So what are you working on right now? What kinds of things are you doing? What are you researching? What are you interested in?
I am working on a couple of PhotoVault apps, which probably doesn't surprise you too much. You've heard, you mentioned my Forensic Mike 1 blog post, which was back in May, I think, of last year, where I was working on a case that I needed to do some decryption. And if you read the post, there was one mention that said there's potentially a lot more work to be done here.
Yeah.
But as far as my purposes for today, I have to move on to the next file, so I'm cutting it off here. And essentially that cutoff point was I found the encryption key I needed in the keychain. So because I work in law enforcement and I had a gray key, that was easy, right? I had the keychain. Right. So it was dead easy to decrypt. But I mentioned that I think it might be possible to decrypt without the keychain.
Ooh.
But that more work would be required.
Right.
So I had that still in the back of my brain. Now, as you know, things are crazy sometimes, and there's a lots of different things happening. The virtual summit, like all these things. Well, a couple of months ago, we had somebody contact us via support, and essentially they had a phone which they had received an AFU extraction of, but they were not going to be able to get a brute force of, and they had found a massive number of encrypted images with PhotoVault. However, in the keychain, they could not locate that encryption key. So they had reached out to our support saying, look, no one supports this. Is there anything you can do? And I think it was McQuaid who made the connection of like, this is the app that Mike posted about. So he connected me with the customer. And after hearing that these images were potentially CSAM, I was like, this is my opportunity to put my entire focus on this. I am going to completely focus on this and nothing else until it's done. And awesome. 2 days later, we had a working POC for doing decryption without the keychain.
So without keychain. So finding the app,
yeah.
No keychain for iOS. So
right. And not even having the pin. So basically, if we encounter the artifact, we can decrypt. So here was the really cool thing, because it was kind of a summation of all of the great things that have been happening, because I helped a customer out, which I love doing and I hope I'll always be able to do. But I realized, like I always do my scripts in LinkPad. I think even that original post in May, it was a LinkPad script that I posted at the end, right? Which, by the way, I had to rewrite it in Python because no one wanted to run it. They're like, I don't want to install LinkPad. So I'm like, fine, I'll write it in Python. But anyway, so I still to this day write all my POCs in LinkPad. Well, this was a magical moment because what I wanted to do is move that POC into an artifact. And right. So that's something that I've kind of done in the past, where I basically team up with a developer and we work together to get it to be production ready. And so that means that the developer is actually doing the heavy lifting, like writing unit tests and functional tests and doing regression and all that other stuff. But anyway, the magic moment was.
So I want people to take a note of that. The heavy lifting isn't always that you implied that the heavy lifting wasn't the decryption.
No,
and the artifact, which is kind of funny. but that it's actually getting to make sure that the code is sound, that it doesn't break anything, that
Yep.
we're going to be able to test it against changes in the app as the app comes in, so we know when it breaks as apps
Yep.
change in case, or if something else happens to break it. Yeah.
Just the QA piece is huge. And
Right.
I think it's one of those things where it's complex as you come into it, but the folks who do stuff with it every day, it's as easy as reciting the alphabet, right?
Exactly.
So I think depending on who you ask,
Who
the
you ask.
whole QA process could either be like this crazy complex beast, or it could be like, yeah, that's what we
It's
do
just
because
because
this
you've
is what
never
we've
done
done.
it before.
That's right. That's right. So, but anyway, it's great because we've had these abilities to have these partnerships. But again, to go back to that magic moment was when I realized that my link pad script, rather than being like a single function that did everything, it was broken into classes that had a distinct responsibility. And so the translation into production ready code was like dead easy.
Good.
And
Awesome.
that was a landmark for me because I realized that this stuff is starting to sink in a little bit, and I'm starting to actually have, that duality of understanding of the development side, but also the forensic
The
side.
forensic side.
Exactly. So I think, and that's not to say everyone needs to achieve that at some point, but I do think that there's a lot of advantages to doing it.
I feel like if there was a such thing as like a triple threat, you know how they say like people who can sing, dance, and act are a triple threat. I
Can't
feel
do any of
like
those.
no, I feel like if you can do forensics, if you can
Yes,
parse, and if you can script, that's like a triple threat,
absolutely.
right? So like
And
you can be the
maybe it's
triple threat
quadruple.
forensicator.
Maybe it's quadruple because you got your reverse. Well, so
Well, you're
but
reverse
there's so many
engineering too,
disciplines.
but
There's reverse engineering. There's chip off and like hardware stuff. Ian
absolutely.
Whippen, Double Black on Twitter. He has done some incredible things. I've always said, look, I'm good with software, but chip offs are great because you can like destroy it and never have to put it back together. So I kind of got some ground with that.
I've put
Uh,
stuff back together after a chip
okay,
off. We
I,
can have
I,
some
I,
discussions about that sometime. It's
I should
fun.
say I. But inevitably I've had like let's call them sandpaper incidents, and I thought I was done. I thought I was toast, and then Ian comes in and looks at it under a microscope and goes something along the lines of like, "What have you done?" and then proceeds to take out all these crazy things and flux and this and that, and all of a sudden it works again, and I'm like, "Wow, I don't think I could ever be this good at this," but I think the important thing is getting exposure to it all, you know?
I think you bring up a really, really good point there. There is so much value in working with people with diverse skill sets. And you brought this up when you were talking about the balance between you and Jamie in engineering. You're
Yep,
bringing it up when you're talking about when you were back at your old lab and your
yep,
balance with Ian working these cases. And I think it's huge to remember that having labs where everybody came from the same school with the same degree and the same pedigree and the same type of background means that you're going to have the same thought processes to how to attack a problem. But if
right.
you're working in a lab where you have people with comp sci backgrounds, people who have done law enforcement, people who have gone straight through a forensics degree program and then came straight to your lab, people who have worked as traditional investigators, people with electronic engineering background on the hardware side, people with comp sci backgrounds, you bring all those people together and you're all working cases and someone has a question and you throw it out and you get 5 different types of ways to attack a problem. And
Yeah.
I feel like you get the most robust thought out solutions when we have teams with diverse skill sets. And I think it's something people should think more about.
Well, and I think there's absolutely recognition by the vendors across the board, just based on, the events of the last couple of years, that is an important, critical piece
Yes.
of having people that have actually used the product, but from different contexts, right?
Yes.
To help with that development cycle. So I think that that's there. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is one of the critical pieces, though, of having those, because, throw 5 different opinions, all of which are going to be valid for different reasons, into a single pot, and there's a potential for some conflict there, right? Because you're going to have
Absolutely.
people thinking like, well, no, this is the way we do it because this is the way we do it. So I think it's definitely important, but you need the right attitude and sort of teamwork skills to be able to have those reasonable conversations, to think through the different possibilities that have been floated, and ultimately come up with something that is, I don't want to go with Frankenstein because that sounds like it's going to be bad, but like a combination of all of the good
Absolutely.
parts, right?
So I would say that something I love specifically about our DFIR community and the folks in DFIR is people check their egos and people try to think about the best solution to provide the best evidence in the case. And I don't
Yeah.
know if that's true in all other communities, but I've never ran into something where we had conflict because of difference of opinion. Usually it's a marriage of those things that
Yeah.
brings us to whatever the final result is. And I'd
Yeah.
say it's something that I think is like amazing about our
It's
community.
important. It's so critical though, too, right? Yeah.
And I think it's because we all know the criticality of what we work on, and that's why we're able to work so well together, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. We have kumbaya. But um, so in terms of where you go
Yeah.
to find your knowledge, what's in general, what's like your go-to resource?
Ooh, can I give more than one?
Abso-freaking-lutely.
Okay. All right. So I guess for me, a lot of times, this is going to sound funny. A lot of times, the best learning I've done has been when I'm not looking for it. Does that, is that
100.
okay?
100. Yes.
All right. So for example, I learned something really great about Frida in the process of doing that commit on Frida tools because
Okay.
I had to look through the code.
Right.
And at that point, I was like, what's this dash F do? And it's like, oh, it means I don't have to write out the stupid app identifier when I'm trying to attach to the process or know the process ID. It'll just attach to the app in the foreground. And I'm like, I wish I had known that a year ago, but I didn't, right? So a lot of times the learning and I will say not just the learning, but the connections that I've made have been when I wasn't specifically like, hey, I got to learn something today. So I want to shout out and then again, this won't surprise anyone because I mentioned in my nominations post the D for Discord, Andrew Rathbun and everybody. Um,
Absolutely.
the amount of connections I've made there has been so impactful on my career personally. It's put me in touch with people I never would have been put in touch with otherwise, and frankly, Twitter. Um,
Absolutely.
if you're the kind of person who's open to learning something new just in the spur of the moment, Twitter can be great for that, right?
So
Because once you get a certain amount of people that you're following who post good stuff, all you got to do is log in and scroll through, and more than likely you're going to get linked to a resource. You
you're going
know,
to learn something,
you're
right?
going to learn
Like
something. Yeah.
if you want to or not. And I think you really hit on something. When you're doing is when you learn,
Yes.
right? Not necessarily when you're sitting through a training class, because it's the application that makes it
Right.
click. For me, it's definitely that way too.
Yes. Yeah.
um, but Twitter is amazing because if you, I don't go on Twitter to find out the answer to how do I parse this particular cache.
Yes.
I go
Yeah.
on Twitter because I know that it's going to tell me what the newest problems are, what people are learning and figuring out, and I'm going to learn something. Like I'm going to, through my 15 minutes, that's social media time,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is funny because it's not BS. I'm only following digital forensics people. And if anybody needs a list, if you go to my Twitter, I have a list of DFIR people who I follow. And I will tell you, I use lists to go ahead and call real quick. I search hashtag DFIR and then I go through my list.
Hmm.
And that helps me keep like a really strong focus.
Yeah.
I'll definitely scroll and see what the people I follow have. But like if I have 15 minutes and I want to focus on learning something, I know I'm going to get to great like today content that way. So I
Yeah.
love that. And
Absolutely.
the Discord, you're right, because it's all about community. It's all about building on each other. And if anyone doesn't or isn't on Discord, I know that Kevin just dropped in the Magnet Forensics username there the invite for the Discord. So if you want to join, there are about 4,000 digital forensics examiners in there talking about forensics. There's categories for any one of your interests, like as Mike was saying, different interests earlier. I don't care if it's chip off and JTAG and ISP, or if it's mobile forensics, or if it's network forensics or vehicle forensics. There's a channel
I
for
think
it.
there's a
And
COVID-19 channel tracing apps.
right.
Or
So there's
COVID-19 like fraud schemes that are going out there.
Andrew
Crazy.
Rathbun has done an amazing job of cultivating and developing that community so that it could be an amazing place. And so thank you for bringing it
Mm.
up. It's just such a great place
Well,
to collaborate with others.
one more I wanted to put in there was a certain Phil and Ladrina, with
Phil Moore and
with a
Ladrina
certain
Sharon.
podcast, a certain weekly update. That has also been one of the, if not the best, sort of places to go when you just want to be up to date on the blog posts and events of the week without having to know them all by heart.
If you need to stay current, that's the place to go.
Yeah.
I would also say for anyone who's been encouraged to write a blog or share a blog, you 100% can go ahead and email Phil directly and tell him that you just put out a blog post. He will make sure it hits This Week in Forensics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is not a problem. DM him on Twitter, send him an email. His information is on This Week in Forensics. He will make sure that your
Yeah.
content is there, and set up an RSS feed, because then your stuff will go there forever.
Yeah. But
It's
also it can be a fun experiment, I think, to see how long it takes him to pick it up on his own. Because it's amazing. It's
he does
amazing.
pick
Like,
up things. He does pick
oh
up things
man.
quickly.
Yeah.
And seriously, also, if you see something on Twitter right away, send it to him.
Yeah.
Especially if you're seeing it in U.S. time, because he's on Australia time. So, but amazing cultivation of everything in forensics for the week.
Yeah.
Ludrina does an amazing job on the malware and threat hunting sections, and Phil does an amazing job on the rest of the sections, and just incredible. So
Yeah.
really appreciate it. By the way, Mike, I haven't told you this, but there have been so many shout outs of love for you, of people talking about your great work, people who are congratulating you for the Newcomer of the Year nomination, people who also agreed on voting for Alexis. Um, People who are saying, well, Andrew just said that, you're the real deal, and he's really loved having you contribute to the Discord. And Andrew is also saying that everyone should consider contributing to This Week in Forensics Patreon. They're doing amazing service to the DFIR community. They definitely deserve the support. And
100%.
as a Patreon contributor myself to This Week in Forensics, I will tell you one of the coolest things is when This Month in Forensics comes out, you actually get time notes with links as a Patreon member, so you do get a little more back. And that really, really helps when I listen to This Month in Forensics and there's something that's mentioned and I want to catch it. I have the article and I have the timestamp of when he mentioned it. It also helps me if I want to go back and hear what he said, go right to that time period in that 20-minute broadcast. So I really love the time notes, and Andrew is agreeing that they're a good addition.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the mention as well. The whole nomination thing is still sinking in a little bit, I think, for me. It's kind of one of those things that internally I did a double take on every minute after I first saw it, just because.
I get it.
Well, yeah,
Like,
I mean, it's a bit like, policing, where you kind of just do what you think your job is, and then you'll randomly receive some recognition from a member of the public, or a victim of a crime or something, and they basically are like, this was a life-changing event for me, and you're like, well, but anyone would have done that, right? Like, this is just what we're just doing what we do. And so I think it's really great. I mean, I'm so humbled to be
well,
recognized that way.
you came into the community and you're public sharing like gangbuster, and that is why you are nominated for Newcomer of the Year, right? Because
Oh,
you had all this experience and you just shared it all, and it's that sharing and the quality of your work and the
thank you.
necessity of your work and the depth of your work, and that's why you're nominated. And
Thank you. I'm going to keep it up.
I
I'm going to keep working on it. This is just the beginning. And now that I'm, working at Magnet and connected to so many great people, I'm so excited for the future. And obviously,
right.
COVID-19 has kind of changed the entire planet in 5 minutes, in ways that no one could have predicted. But I'm hoping that there can be some positive to come from it, as awful as it is and as tragic as it can be for a lot of folks out there. The fact that we can, look at like Magnet Virtual Summit, like the amount of people that we got to experience that is awesome.
Global collaboration. The
Yeah.
fact that we can now collaborate more comfortably globally
Yeah.
in we've gotten all better with asynchronous communication.
Yep.
So I've been collaborating more with more people from around the world more regularly than
Yep.
ever. And that just increases and makes everything better. Like
Yes.
insurmountable the
Yeah.
amount of change in communication that we've been able to do at a global scale now. So if we're going to look at positives, that's definitely one.
Yeah. I'm also wondering, like, the code behind you. Am I the only one who's like tried to read it and see where
So
it came from?
we can discuss that afterwards. I'll share it with you, but I won't share it publicly.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. Uh-oh.
no, it's nothing bad. It's nothing
Okay.
bad.
Okay.
I do appreciate the effort.
Okay. That's funny.
So since you're asking me about something that's outside, what when people expect to know about you? What
Oh,
do you have what else makes Mike tick outside of REing Android apps?
wait, I need to do something else in life? I thought there was only one. Uh, well, let's see. What do I do? I mean, I've been a gamer for a large portion of my life. Again, probably not something that's going to shock a lot of people. So playing it
Explains
safe
the
with
headset.
that one, yeah, explains
Is
the
that a gaming
everything.
headset, right?
Yeah, yeah. I got another one right here actually, but these are great headsets, by the way. The Corsair,
What's
I
your
love them.
game? What's your game
Um,
du jour?
oh man, you're not going to make me tell this on live TV, are you? Okay.
No, you don't have.
EverQuest was my game for a long, long
Oh,
time.
EverQuest.
I played it for about 20 years. I'm not actually playing it right now, but they've started doing a thing where they basically take everything back to the kind of idea of when it was first released, and then they call it a progression server. So then it slowly unlocks the content. And to be honest, it doesn't really take you back because there's been so many changes over the years that they can't recreate that original feel. But it's fun. So I've
So
been
I
playing
would
that.
say, as far as games doing throwbacks, Final
Yeah.
Fantasies
Oh, Final
throwback.
Fantasies are amazing. Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
the newest one doing the throwback back to eight.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. The
Now I don't
yeah,
remember.
I've been a Final Fantasy player since I think my earliest recollection was receiving Final Fantasy 2, which is actually 4.
Right.
Two in America was 4 in Japan, on Super Nintendo. And I remember I plugged it into my TV, which was vault sized at the time, and turned the volume all the way up, and got in trouble. I remember that because the intro music to the
Because the
whole
intro
game was
music.
just booming through the
Oh,
house.
it was
Um,
so amazing back then
yeah,
too,
yeah.
right? Like
Oh,
I
it
thought
was.
those graphics were like the
Yeah,
bomb.
yeah.
So I'll tell you, EverQuest. The only thing I have only relationship I have to EverQuest is the one of my bridesmaids in my wedding was like she was a Marine and she was super into EverQuest.
Wait,
Like
you know
that
what?
was her
The
world.
amount of military folks and law enforcement folks that play EQ is completely disproportionate. I don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, all I can imagine is that the what they call raiding, which is when everybody gets together to like
Yep.
kill big bad monster,
Yep.
it takes a certain amount of discipline and focus that
And
maybe has some
teamwork.
parallel teamwork that maybe has some parallels to the sort of militarism stuff. Like maybe it's a little bit of a commonality there for people.
Alexis Brignoni tells us StarCraft for life.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I played a lot of SE in my day. Like, what is that? Big Game Hunters with much money. Do you ever play that map, Alexis? That was
I
the
don't
one
know.
back
Find
in the
out if he
day.
did.
That was the one. By the way, I can't see the chat, so I'm relying on Jessica to play the moderator here.
That's technically exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, I think.
Then continue on. Continue on.
Andrew's a Diablo fan.
Oh yeah, I love
I've
Diablo.
never played Diablo, but my husband's a big fan of Diablo, so I've got
Uh,
a Diablo player in the house.
PoE.
I don't
Played
know.
some PoE. Path of Exile. It's like a Diablo clone, but they've gone off and yeah.
Tara says she'll stick to Mario Kart.
Right. Mario Kart's good too. Mario Kart is good too.
So
I did.
getting a
I
little
sent.
good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. One of the funniest things I did. I bought a nice TV, and it's like 75-inch and latest and greatest. And I remember I sent a screenshot, or not a screenshot, a photo of me playing Zelda: Link to the Past on it on my SNES Classic, and I sent that to my old staff sergeant Jeremy, and he's like, you get this brand new TV and then you play retro games on it. And I'm like, of course I do.
So getting back to forensics, there's actually a forensic question for you in the chat.
Uh, live
Um,
questions. The ante
live
just went up.
question. So, and I'm probably going to butcher your username, so I apologize. But Ningo Gang guy asks, do you reverse Android malware?
Um, in theory, I could, but in practice, I have not done a lot of it. I would say the most exposure to malware reversing that I have is actually from 4610, SANS 4610.
Right. Great
Um,
class.
oh, the best course I have ever taken in my professional career. And I
So
think it's because
shout out to
oh, you know,
malware reverse engineering
yeah,
4610 from SANS.
yeah. Evan Digert and Anuj Soni were my instructors, and they were amazing. That was in Austin in 2017, and I know they've done a bunch of
Oh,
upgrades.
right after the user summit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that was brand new content at the time, but I know they've overhauled it again to use Kidra as opposed to
Nice.
free version of IDA, and lots of focus on malware. One of the best moments of that whole course was, I think it was Anuj was standing at the front, and we were working through some packed malware. And so we advanced a slide, we had unlocked something, and the entire screen was filled with base64 encoded text. And he goes, this is a reflective moment where you look at the screen and you're like, yes, I'm making progress. And it's
That
literally just
is
encoded, right? There's
that is awesome.
yeah,
That is awesome.
it's good times.
So, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to get into digital forensics?
Um, I think getting signed up for some of the resources we talked about is a great first step. There is no doubt that certifications are going to help you, but they aren't absolutely necessary. So I like to kind of mention that well, every certification is undoubtedly going to help you. I don't think it's the right assumption to say that you absolutely need them to be successful in this field. And it really
Yes.
depends on your individual circumstances as far as what ins you might have. Like, for example, if you work as a police officer and your agency has a digital forensics team, then chances are you're not going to need much in the way of prerequisites to get started. Whereas if you have just got maybe like a comp sci degree, come out of college, and you're looking for some digital forensics position somewhere, then maybe those certifications are going to be a better investment for you. The path for everyone is different, and I feel like that is actually one of the things that's great about our field, is that there isn't one way to get into it.
Absolutely.
And especially on the I always keep going back to reverse engineering, but on the RE side, there really aren't that many certifications out there.
Yes.
So
That's
chances
right.
are, if you've spent a
You've
month
got
or
the
two on
course for
this stuff,
610.
you have the same experience as a lot of people. 4610 is a great one though, if you do want to get your GREM, and with everything being virtual now, time is of the essence.
So, you mentioned some of those. I wrote a blog post a while back that kind of lists like 10 things I just dropped in the chat to stay current with DFIR. And
Yep.
it's exactly, the post is a couple years old. I would update it to add the digital forensics Discord and watching and reading what's in those channels.
Yep.
But really, if you're looking at This Week in Forensics, if you're looking at about DFIR, if you're looking at DFIR.training, if you take one or two training courses, you can really learn a substantial amount. But there are also graduate programs or bachelor's programs in digital forensics. So your point is right. There's so many ways to get in, and that keeping current part is awesome.
Start a blog and start releasing work, and you're going to get noticed. You're going to get picked up by Phil. You're going to get mentioned on Twitter. And I can almost guarantee that if you do good work and you publish it regularly on your blog, when it comes time to start looking for that job switch, maybe you're coming from another job altogether, then that's going to be beneficial at the least.
Are you implying that one of the reasons that, or maybe a benefit of the fact that you started blogging a lot right before you left law enforcement and came into that maybe, well, I mean, I will tell you 100%, I vouched, for your level of technical work based on what I had done as far as validating and analyzing your blogs and what you were sharing with the community.
Well, thank
And
you.
I was looking to it and finding value in it. And that happens over and over again. So if you have something out there,
Mhm.
I agree with that on another point. Back
Yeah.
when I used to be in a position where I was running a team in a forensics lab
Yeah.
and I was regularly hiring new examiners, those
Mhm.
that had public content,
Yeah.
be it a blog or a script or something, instead of accidentally asking them something that wasn't in their area of expertise,
Right.
I would ask them about the work that I know they did, and they were
Mm.
able to go
Gosh.
into more and more and gush.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's
uh,
nothing better than being passionate about this stuff, because then work becomes fun, and if work equals fun, then you're set. You're set.
100%, right? And who doesn't love what we do? So, right? Like if you
Yeah.
love this, then you're in the
Yeah.
right profession. And
Exactly.
I know you feel this way too. Like we're the luckiest people in the world to get to make a difference with work that we enjoy
Yep.
and that we're passionate about. So,
Absolutely.
Mike, thank you so much for this great conversation. I
Thank
do
you.
see Nagone Gang guy definitely wants to get in touch with you.
Sure.
I'm guessing he's on Twitter, so please make
Yeah.
sure that you reach out to Mike. I saw you had some more questions in the
Yeah.
chat. I
Forensic
would
Mike 1.
suggest
DMs are
for
open.
and his it's right under your name right now, Mike. So
Oh,
I
okay.
know you can't see that.
Down
So
there.
please down there. So please catch up directly with Mike. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer those questions. And anyone listening to this at any time later, please feel free to reach out to Mike at Forensic One on Twitter, or Mike are you Michael or Mike.Williamson at Mag?
Mike.Williamson at Magnet Forensics.
Mike.Williamson at magnetforensics.com. And just thank you so much for being our guest today. What a
Thank you.
great conversation. For real, next week is Alyssa Torres. I know last week I messed up the schedule. So I mean that for real this time. It was such a pleasure talking to Mike. I'll tell you, everyone, for a quick moment. Thanks again, Mike, so much.
Thank you.
Our upcoming schedule: Alyssa Torres, the week after David Cowan, the week after Heather Smith, Tara Melton, Alexis Brignoni, Joshua Hickman, Richie Cyrus, Cindy Murphy, Trey Amick, Elon Wright, who's probably trying between her and the guest after, James Duffy, probably competing for next year's Newcomer of the Year, Devin Ackerman, Ladrina Sharon. So just really great people who we're going to be with over the next couple of weeks. So really hope to see you soon. Thanks, everyone.